Hey guys, Scott here. Today I thought I would give kind of my parting thoughts on Texas Chainsaw Massacre. This is probably the last video I'll make on the game for a while, until there's some big update or something like that. But it pretty much tracks with what I thought from the test a couple months ago. I felt like this game was not going to have too much longevity, and that really does seem to be the case for me. I need to stress that this is for me personally on my personal channel. I feel like the game doesn't have too much longevity. You can completely disagree, and that's okay. I'm not even saying that that's a bad thing for the game. People get very defensive when I say that the game doesn't have much longevity to it. They think I'm saying it's a bad game, which I'm not. I had an incredibly large amount of fun playing this game. It's just, I don't see myself playing it for a long time. And I'll keep it brief. I'll simplify the argument I have. And it's just simply, this game doesn't really have that much of a mechanical skill component. In fact, it basically has no mechanical skill component. The entire skill cap for this game is just map knowledge. That's pretty much it. There's no other part that you have to learn. It's just, do you know the maps? Do you know where the fuse box are? Do you know where the gas valves are in each map? Do you know where the basements connect to upstairs? And that's it. Once you've learned that, you've basically learned the entire game. There's no mechanical skill to actually learn with it. The only exception I would say would be Leatherface has a specific mechanic where he has to feather his chainsaw to not overheat it while moving faster. There's a little bit of a mechanical skill there, and that's also a good example of what I mean by a mechanical skill, something that extends past simply knowing, hey, this is where this goes, this is where this goes. And don't get me wrong, that macro gameplay knowledge of where things are is very important. Even to a game like Dead by Daylight, it's very, very important. I'd argue in some aspects it's even more important than the mechanical skill component, especially in a game like DBD. But the problem is, I don't have any long-term goals or objectives when I'm playing the game. Once I learn the maps, which I'm pretty close to doing, that's it. There's nothing else to learn. And so I'm just basically doing the same thing. It's almost a flowchart now. And I think that's the main reason I don't see this game having that much longevity. And even if we compare it to release Dead by Daylight, which I don't even consider fair, because release Dead by Daylight had way more an excuse to be simple and buggy and imbalanced and stuff, because there was basically nothing to compare it to. There was no other real asymmetrical game like that, so it had nothing to learn from, where this game has, almost a decade of asyms to actually learn from mistakes, and, so it's not really the same thing. But even if you do compare to release DBD, even release DBD still had more of a mechanical skill component. Even Hillbilly Saw, especially with the flick that he used to have, Wraith with his post-invis lunge, learning how to master that and stuff like that. There was still something, even though it was very limited, there was still something to try to get better at in the game. From a mechanical standpoint, and that felt good. I felt like, the first killer I started playing the game with Huntress, and I spent like a year playing her because it felt like I was still learning stuff as I played her. Every single game I was getting better. Oh, I can throw this hatchet through this little slit in the wall. I didn't realize that. Every game I just learned something new. Where in Texas Chainsaw, I feel like I'm already, I got it. I definitely, I get it. I understand how to play the game now. And it took not much time at all. And once you know how to do that as Survivor, it's pretty hard to not escape every single game. Now, I did play with friends, and playing with friends that also know how to play obviously makes it a lot easier. But the game felt like I already knew where stuff was, and there's not much else to do. Now, it's not to say somewhere down the line they don't add killers that have a mechanical component, because when you add a killer with a mechanical skill component, you also enable survivors to have to learn how to counter that mechanical skill component. So it's fun gameplay for both sides, where they both have to figure out and get better at playing as it and playing against it. In this game, it's, what a really good analogy I can make? Every single game of this game, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, feels like you're playing on the map The Game in Dead by Daylight. For those who don't play DBD, I don't know why you're here, I'm a DBD channel, but it is basically a map with all safe obstructions, they're called pallets, where you just go to a pallet, you drop it, move on, killer kicks the pallet, moves on. It's very boring gameplay for both sides, because it's basically just a flowchart. It's just survivor has to do this here, killer has to do this here, and you just do that 20 times until the resources are gone, and then the killer wins, or you get out before that happens, and then the killer loses. That's what it is. It feels like every game of Texas Chainsaw is The Game. It's that map, because there's very little, there's no mind games at any of the loops here. Basically, if you're getting chased by a Johnny or a Leatherface, as long as you have two connected map obstacles, which you almost always do, you're basically invincible. The only time those killers ever hit you is when you're just in the open, which does happen. Sometimes a gate's in the open, you don't have obstacles. I'm not saying you can't get killed by them, because of course you can. But survivors that kind of know what they're doing will always position themselves in places where it's just you have two connected things, and you just go through the hole in the wall, go through the hole in the wall, you just repeatedly do the same thing over and over again. And there's no like moonwalking for the killer. There's no mind gaming it. There's no like, you can't really apply your skill to it. You just do the same thing at every single tile. And for anyone that's going to try to come say, well, Dead by Daylight, you just run around it and drop it, blah, blah, blah. If you think there are no mind games at certain tiles in DBD, you are likely just not very knowledgeable about the game, because there are. Not all of them. For example, the game, there's nothing. That map sucks. That's why the map is seen as so bad. There's no mind gaming any of that shit. But most tiles in DBD, for example, have something you need to learn about them. So even powers aside, just mechanically speaking from the chases, there is still a right way to play a TL wall. There's a right way to play a long wall jungle gym. There's a right way to play a long wall jungle, or a long short wall. There's a right way to play shack. There's a right way to, there's all these tiles in the game that have right ways to play that killers can try to mind game, and survivors can try to beat that mind game and stuff like that. There's a unique interaction happening at all of these. Even if you don't notice it, it does happen. And the killers that are very good at Dead by Daylight, for example, are ones that are able to capitalize on that more often than the survivors can. In Texas Chainsaw, I'm just not seeing any of that happening. It's mostly just the same flowchart of going through the same thing. It's really hard to describe without comparing the two gameplays side by side, but it's a lot more simplistic. And again, I don't even see that as a negative towards the game. It's not a negative, minus, it's not a con to the game. It's just designed to be that way. It's designed to not have much of a skill ceiling. It's designed to be a very simple game everyone can get into. Just get drunk with your buds and play some, like Texas Chainsaw. It's kind of what Friday the 13th was, and that's okay. But because of that, the game doesn't really lend itself to lasting a very long time, at least in my opinion, because I have nothing to aspire to really learn mechanically. Once you learn the maps, that's it. You've learned the game, and there's nothing else to do otherwise than just, play with your friends, and that's it. So that's the main reason I think this game does not have very much longevity. That's not to say in the future they won't have that. Maybe they will. It's just I have nothing to compare it to, really, because, it's the game just came out, and I don't know what their plans are. We've seen the release. We've seen the leaks for the first killer. It doesn't seem like it's going to have much of a mechanical skill either. It's like something with barbed wire and stuff like that. But still, there's really not much going on there. So I don't see that really changing. And if they do finally over time change, I don't think this game will last long enough for them to reach the 7-8 years that DBD has. Honestly, one of the main reasons DBD lasts is because the insane licenses that they got, it drew interest into the game, which gave them enough of a player base, which allowed the game to grow more and finally get to the point where we have all this insane variety and stuff like that. I don't think Texas Chainsaw has enough in the IP to get enough eyes onto the game to make it last long as DBD to get to the same point. That's why I compare current DBD to release Texas Chainsaw, because I don't think this game will ever last as long as DBD. So you're asking me to compare year 7 of DBD to year 7 of a game that won't have a year 7, if that makes sense. So it seems a little unfair, and I get that. But anyway, those are my thoughts on the game. I'm going to go play Alien now. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.